Welcome to the Developing Life Podcast. Welcome to episode 14 of the Developing Life Podcast. The world is being rapidly transformed by technology, so how can businesses navigate the evolution being shaped by artificial intelligence? Today, we are joined by Lynda Decker, a visionary multidisciplinary designer whose work encompasses brand strategy and identity, interactive communication, and design criticism. A native New Yorker with multiple MFA degrees from Syracuse University and the School of Visual Arts, Lynda is the creative force behind her firm, Decker Design, and has created influential brand strategies and visual identities for clientele, including the Clinton Foundation and Goldman Sachs. Now currently focusing on branding for law firms, her work is continuously setting new benchmarks in design. A committed advocate for gender equity, Lynda has served as vice president for the AIGA New York chapter and is currently the national co-chair of the Women-Led Initiative, championing the Double or Nothing campaign in partnership with IBM, courts, and other leading agencies that aim to reshape industry standards. Joined by our host, Heather Crank, Lynda breaks down how AI and technological trends are changing the way businesses move and design and innovative strategies that they can employ to turn challenges into opportunities for growth.
Thank you, True. Welcome, Lynda. I am so thrilled to have you on this podcast. For those people who don't know, I met Lynda straight out of college many years ago in New York City, and she doesn't remember the advice she gave me, but it was life-changing. And she made me feel like that my career was a possibility for me. I'm highly introverted, and I was kind of hiding at this event we were at, and she came right up to me and put me at ease. So I'm eternally grateful. And we've maintained this lovely connection, and how incredibly humbled I am that you are here on our podcast. Welcome.
Oh, well, Heather, thank you so much thank you for having me. And it's so funny. I tell people the story about how we met at the Guggenheim, and you had won an incredible award from Adobe, and your work was amazing, and you were so uncomfortable. And all I remember was trying to just make you feel better. And then I absolutely did not remember what I told you as far as your career advice. So, you have me there.
Oh, man, I'm like turning bright red now. Thank you, Lynda. Part of the reason I wanted to invite you onto this podcast is you have this incredible career, and it spans across multiple industries, and you're really connected to a lot of different groups. A couple of the groups that you are connected to, we're in Joel Pilger's group, the AIGA, which we mentioned earlier, Christo's Future Pro group. You're on multiple Slack channels with New York design, what would we call this? Design studios. Mm-hmm. And we began a conversation about what the heck is going on with the design industry. Things have been really upended the last maybe 2 years. And I just wanted to hear your opinion. We talked about AI being part of the disruption, but then you also brought up the idea of interest rates. So I just really would love to hear your opinion on what you've heard kind of underground and what you think personally.
Yeah, I think the industry is really going through massive amount of change, even more than anybody is really acknowledging, and maybe more than any of us can really understand at this point without the benefit of any kind of hindsight. I think a great deal of it started during the pandemic, because I'm really coming at things from the perspective very much of a New York design firm. There are somewhere around 56,000 designers in the New York metro area, which makes that area one of the largest markets. And when you think about how so many different studios or agencies or design firms deal with different parts of the economy, there are design offices that specifically work with, say, the food and restaurant hospitality industry. There are people who work in travel. There are people such as myself, which have a lot of professional service clients. Then there are people who are working in, consumer goods. And then you also have groups of people who are working with the entertainment industry. There's tons of live action studios, motion graphics studios. I mean, the New York market is very varied, but it's also reflective, I think, of the national market. And I think during the pandemic, initially you started to see agencies or design offices really get hurt who were working in industries that those industries that required people to attend something. So if you had hospitality or restaurant clients, you found that all of a sudden all of your work stopped. And then the writers' strike last year just I think it killed so many people. It was, the second order effects from all of those sort of unrelated economic events suddenly became very close to home for everybody. And so I was on many of the Rev Think groups where people were just talking about having to let lots of people go, trying to get to the next month just to cover their expenses. A lot of people gave up office space and I think the term now have a fully distributed workforce. And I know, like for us in New York, our lease was up and it was, our landlord was going to increase the rent. And it just became not viable to be able to have a big office that people just didn't want to go to every day. And, and I think that was true probably for other organizations that would probably be the same size as mine. But what we found last year in the early part of the year, we had a lot of financial services clients, and they, once there were, I think it was Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, and then I think there was one more bank that failed. And then all of a sudden you saw every single financial services client retract and cut their work, cut the projects. So I think that there are so many factors. Like I was reading the other day how architectural firms are having a great deal of difficulty because with higher interest rates, there are fewer, their clients are construction companies. So there are fewer developers who really want to take out big construction loans. And, so it's just, it's this ripple effect that is just running through the entire economy. And I do think that AI is going to be a factor for us, but I don't think we know yet what it is going to be because I think everybody has just been getting hit with all of these different challenges.
Yeah.
And yet we just, that's going to be the next thing. I mean, one of the, what is it? If I were to say something like sort of ridiculous is like Canva has taken a lot of work away graphic designers. I mean, it's crazy because like a client goes, I can do it. And then even if they don't do it well, they're so proud of themselves.
Right. Yeah.
And standards have become lower. I mean, that is the other part of this is that, we're talking about all the economic issues, but then there's sort of like the social societal issues that, where people will, okay, you might be able to take a nice photo with your iPhone. I can take a photo with my iPhone, and my husband, who is a professional photographer, will take a completely different photo of the same thing. And his photo will look 100 times better than my photo because he knows what he's doing and he's talented.
Yeah.
But, in the world out there, I think what we're seeing is, the average person takes a photo and they're like, oh, this is good. It's a picture. And then everyone's kind of going along with it. And, that's where it's like, just because it's done, it seems to be good enough. And that, I think, is another factor that is a problem right now that we're all dealing with.
Do you think that, eventually that will sort itself out? I mean, it seems like there's kind of a sea of sameness that's happening right now where I'm getting a little fatigued by seeing a lot of imagery generated that has the same quality, and I'm missing that level of conceptual thinking. But I could be biased though too, because I've worked in design for a while, so I know what I'm looking at, but I also know I'm not the only one who knows, what I'm seeing. So how do you think this is going to sort itself out?
You know, I see glimmers of hope in certain places
You
where
do.
I'll have a client that will identify that as exactly the issue that is a problem. So I I had a law firm client once here in New York. They were, you would call them a boutique litigation
Hmm.
firm. And I was doing a competitive analysis, and I went and I showed them 12 other law firms that they told me that they compete against. And I showed them the homepage of every one of those firms. And every single homepage had a skyline of New York on it.
Oof.
Some of them had the Brooklyn Bridge. Some of them had one of the uptown bridges, but it
Hmm.
was all the same, whether it was black and white or color. It was basically the same type of imagery and the same approach. And that's where I have to say the glimmer of hope is every once in a while you have a client who will say, everyone in my industry is doing things that are exactly the same. We want to do something different. We have to differentiate.
Right.
But but those visionary clients are few and
Hmm.
far between.
Mm.
I think there's so much where, and I would never really want to be this cynical, but as I just getting older and the more I see the cycles of the industry,
Hmm.
it's all about the money.
Yeah.
And it's like, if there is, people want to do things unless they really value that sort of sense of brand differentiation.
Hmm.
What is happening is they're just settling for good enough because they just don't want it to cost any money.
Right.
Like, they're looking at design and branding and communication as a cost center
Hmm.
instead of something that is an investment for their organization's future.
Wow. So what do you think the future of design is? I mean, do you think there's a future, or do you think we're sort of on a slow descent?
That's such a
That's a
hard
big
question.
question.
It's a really good question. And, it's something like, I don't want to say that we're on a descent, because I want to believe and I want to feel that something I love is going to survive. But I suspect that I think the industry is going to become smaller.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that what I am seeing is it's harder and harder for, at one time there used to be like, sort of like, you'd have all of these different levels of the design industry. You'd have like the small studios that would do, some would do really creative work, some would do workmanlike work. And then you'd have more, and there were clients that really wanted that sort of like hand holding of like, I just want to work with a small team and know that I'm a big fish in a small pond.
Right.
And then there were other, firms that were, they were large. They had, layers of, there were strategists, account
Hmm.
executives, all
Hmm.
sorts of layers of creative people. And some did good work and some did not. But that was like another tier that existed. And
Hmm.
then you had sort of the in-house corporate studios.
Right.
And now I think what's happening is the it's just harder for those smaller studios to sustain themselves,
Hmm.
because what's happening, and when I was I was speaking with this woman who is sort of the AIGA New York administrator. She said there's a lot of work, but it's being done in-house, and it's not going out to outside designers. And there's a tendency for them when they get overloaded, not to go to a small firm, but they'll go to a freelancer, but they're trying to eliminate the use of freelancers. And she said to me that right now she sees that there's a lot of freelancers who are looking for work. Like they don't have anything coming up for like the next 3 or 4 months. And it's again with things being cut back. So it sort of feels like it's going to be a situation where you're going to have the larger design firms that have really solid they may have financial backing, maybe from an agency ownership, or, they're just extremely successful. And then you'll have like the in-house design groups who, will be functioning in a number of different ways. I mean, they're structured in there's so much variety in terms of what's going on there. And design has become defined. I told you we were going to end up going down a lot of different paths. I mean, it's not, there's not necessarily visual designers working at, in these corporations. There's experience designers and then service designers. There's design has become very broad, but it's still, I think it's going to split into those two sort of areas.
Right. And this is for a lot of people who set up their home office and went freelance during the pandemic and left the office. Now it's like the whiplash thing of like, now everybody's going back in house, but they can only accept so many people. So that funnel is narrowing. And I see it all over LinkedIn, all over social media. People are really feeling this. So do you know of any resources or places people could go to learn more about this, or an area you would recommend, or how can people kind of stay on top of this so they can make better decisions? Because I feel like a lot of people are just confused.
Yeah, you know what? I think I share the confusion. I don't know if I have an answer to like, how do you find out more? I think for myself, I'm just trying to talk to as many people as possible. Now, of course, you have a limited amount of time and energy and ability to do that. But like I said, I'm on a Slack channel in New York, and with a number of different designers who, are sharing some of their experiences, sharing talent when they have to reduce the size of their team, where they'll recommend people. I think we have a tendency to all sort of go away into our electronic silos, but maybe it's really more of, trying to get together and even in person with other people, so that you can sort of share experiences, and just try to see. I think, I do think that, everyone has to keep, upping their skills over and over again. Like, I mean, Heather, you are a master of AI in the, visual sense. And I think it's, it is, what is this? Like AI is not going to take your job, but someone who knows AI really will take your job.
Right.
So I think in the short term, I think people need to, every time there's a new piece of technology that comes down the road. And I see resistance more with people who are older, who are in my generation, where they're just like, I don't want to deal with that. And I'm just like, are you crazy? Like, you have to know, you have to understand it. And, I mean, I'm constantly between, ChatGPT, Perplexity, and Claude, just fooling around with them all the time just to see what they're capable of doing. And I think you have to, whether it's taking classes or whatever, you just have to stay on top of it. But as far as like finding work, I think it's so often people get work through other people that they know. And I think
Yes.
that you have to have real human relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting too with the whole AI component. There's such a backlash about the way AI learns that I feel like people are distracted by that and they're not seeing this big freight train that's coming their way.
Huge.
Yeah. And there's the car app, which is just launched where artists can go and put their work. It's not Instagram because there was that whole thing that Meta is now scraping. They've discovered that Meta is scraping the information, even though that's been going on for years and years.
Yeah.
But there's more of a focus on it, or just somebody wrote me the other day, did you know that Adobe is doing this? I'm like, oh yeah, here's how you shut that off. That's been going on forever, So it's like some people are waking up, but I also feel like it's creating like this tribalism and this war of us versus the AI. But the AI has a lot of money, and
It's
we're these
lots of
little
money.
designers. It's not going to go
Yeah.
well.
It's not going to go well. I mean, when you look at like AI is being developed by all of the biggest corporations. I mean, Microsoft has
Yes.
majority ownership
Yes.
in OpenAI and ChatGPT.
Hmm.
And was it Amazon, I think, is behind Claude.
Yeah.
And I don't know who's behind Perplexity. Do
I
you?
don't know. I don't know.
And then Adobe is, I think, one of the reasons that visually, I think people feel a little more comfortable with Adobe is just that on a corporate level, that Adobe is guaranteeing that the images are
Yes.
vetted so that if you put together something that you are, that you're not going to get sued as opposed to like Mid-Journey where like everything is,
Right.
it's a free for all.
Yes.
That's the Wild West is Mid-Journey.
Yes. Yeah. It's true. And it's interesting playing around with AI and jumping in and kind of what can this do and being curious. I was surprised at the reaction I personally received as if I'm evil for doing these things. I'm like, I'm I'm just trying to make a living, people. I'm a commercial artist. I'm making no illusions that I'm a fine artist. I am a commercial artist and I use the industry standard, and that's how I stay employed. So there's this whole thing that's going on, and I'm not really sure how this is going to settle. I fear for people that they're not totally aware of what's been happening the last 5 or 6 years and will continue to happen and will speed up. Um, yeah, I just don't know where this is going. So that's just a comment.
Yeah. And I mean, I see where, somebody wrote in the chat that Perplexity was started by three engineers, Meta.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Liesl. Yeah, I don't, you know, I mean, there's so many things like I am grateful for. When you go onto Photoshop right now and if you
Yes.
want to do like a really quick silhouette of something, you just
Yes.
and it's like, I mean, 2 seconds, it's done. I mean, you remember it was like we all would sit there
Oh,
doing like
oh
these,
God, just shoot me.
yeah, exactly. You'd be sitting there late at night trying to refine like the edges of your
Hair.
artwork, Oh, hair. I mean, it may not be perfect, but it just like if you're just doing something really quick just to show an idea to somebody,
Mm-hmm.
it's so wonderful. Or you can go in there and then you can adjust it, you can fix
Right.
it. So
Yeah.
there are things that are, genuine time savers. I mean, I've had clients who are, where there's no money to do anything. And I need like a good headline for something. And
Mm-hmm.
I will put some copy and, nothing that is like private, things that are already out in public into like Claude or into ChatGPT and say, please generate 10 headlines for me.
Yeah.
And then one day I was like, wow, this is fantastic. This would have cost like $3,000
Yeah.
if I went to a
Yeah.
writer. but I was
Yeah.
able to get something. And then the other thing is sometimes it just generates an idea for you. So then you are able to you're like, oh, you know what? I know what this should say.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just helps you get off that blank page. But there's so many ways it's a time saver.
Yeah.
And, I mean, are the robots going to come and, to kill all of us? I don't know, but I do say please and thank you all the time when I'm using it.
You do,
I
really? Oh
do.
my
So I'm
God.
hoping the robots aren't going to come for me.
Oh, you're sweetening up those robots. Oh my God. That's really cute. Okay, so we're looking at a big shift here in the design industry, and we're not sure where it's going, and it's a little bit confusing. Now we have the question of ethics. So as people are wanting more transparency, they're wanting to know how these robots are learning, we have the beginning of ethics committees. And I came across this article, I'm going to post it in the chat here, by TechCrunch, that Meta created a ethics committee, and it's all white men. And I really, I mean, how many years is this going to go on with tech? You and I have discussed this
Yeah.
ad nauseum. You even gave a presentation at Ben Design 5 or 6 years ago about this very topic about women not being compensated the same as men and women in tech and all that. How do you feel about this?
I mean, it just drives me crazy. I, I mean, there are so few women in tech. And then I think with the whole controversy about, OpenAI, and there were, I think some of the board members who resigned were, or one of them was a woman, and she's like complained very vocally about Sam Altman. And, I think that a lot of these people, I think there's another issue that we have along with there's not enough women in tech, but there's
Mhm.
also a problem with our, regulatory agencies
Yes.
because Washington does not understand tech.
No.
I mean, our Senate, I'm sure they are very smart people, but it is like a nursing home. I mean, they are so elderly. Maybe some of their staff understand how technology works, but we're seeing, I mean, all of like the performances that go on, like, trying to force Mark Zuckerberg to apologize to parents. I mean, change section 230. Don't go and just make him just stand there and say, I'm sorry. Like, what good
Yeah.
does that do anybody? Change it for future generations.
Yes.
Nobody. So, what I would say is we need more women in government and we need more women. We do need more women in technology, but I do feel that where some of the better odds are is to get more women and young women into government so that they can actually facilitate change, because nothing is going to happen with any of these companies unless they are forced, unless there's regulation and unless the fines are increased so that it's more than just a parking ticket for them. I
Yeah.
mean, these are companies that are making billions and trillions of dollars. Until there is some sort of financial incentive for them to change, it will never change.
Yeah.
So I think, yes, we need to get more women in technology, but I think if women are getting shut out of those boardrooms, go to Washington, like
Mm.
start to run for office. I mean,
Mhm.
I think, we're finally getting to the point in the Senate where I think that there are, it's not just like 2 or 3 women there, but like, come on, like, run for office. We need to make change, and women need to, I mean, because women are going to think about the future. Women are going to think about their children. They're going to think
Mhm.
about their neighbors' children,
Mhm.
and they are going to want things to be better. And I think it's just the solution is run for office,
Wow.
make change happen.
Wow, my mind is blown. I would have never gone there, but you're 100% right. And even during the TikTok hearings, I was rolling my eyes. I was like,
It
oh
is
my
so
God.
stupid.
Kidding.
It's like, oh, what are they going to do? Oh, they're going to force, so they're going to, make the Chinese government sell, who are going to remove the algorithm that makes it so successful anyway. They're not going to sell the algorithm. So then so what's going to happen is they're going to sell it to some billionaire. And then the same thing is going to keep on happening as has been happening.
Yes.
So it's just, it's really like the problem, anytime they find these companies, it's just like a slap on the wrist. They just think it's like the cost of doing business for them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I'm going to ask you one question here. I've got a question that came in from Milka. Hello, Milka. She is asking, would you consider the AI movement in design art compared to photography technology challenging the traditional artists? So I think what she's asking is when you had photography that came on the scene, it disrupted painters, who that was like the worst thing ever. And then we even had that happened again when Adobe came on the scene with Photoshop and changed the game. So I think she's wondering if this is a similar trend.
Well, if you really want to think back, when the Macintosh came out in 1984, remember those, you've probably seen those dot matrix printers where it had the really crude typography on it. Like they were all just sort of like the letter A would be, they do curves.
Yeah.
So everything was very sort of geometric and everyone started making fun of the typography. And then all of a sudden PostScript came along and we had things that looked like typography and we had PostScript printers. And then there was still like people in the industry saying, oh, you know what? It's, this is terrible typography. We still need typesetters. And then all of those corporate publications in the era of print that used to spend $200,000 with a typographer for their annual report every year suddenly found themselves within like a 3-year period finding that there was no more work coming to a typesetter because all of that typesetting work was being done on Macs. And people, so a lot of things were really crude. There was still paste ups that were being done at the time, on boards, but people were outputting stuff from Macs. And then there was criticism that it wasn't good enough. Today we can't even imagine sending something out to a typesetter. That was a very successful money-making industry at one period in time. And I think it was probably all over by like 1986, 87. And so AI is going to disrupt everything. We know that. We don't know if it's going to put whole parts of the industry out of business or will it create something completely brand new? I suspect it will create something brand new. When you think about how, yes, there are some illustrators that probably still sit there with like a pen and a little bit of watercolor and then scan their illustration and send it over to like the New Yorker or whatever. But there are so many people who are there working in Photoshop or Illustrator. It's going to be another tool that people will use, and it will create another form of art that will be it will be embraced, I think. And some people will really explore something in terms of the fine arts. I think Marion Banshees already is like doing these crazy pieces of art with, I think she's using Midjourney and a lot of repetitive objects that are just like, they're mind blowing. And she's positioning those as fine art. And so I think, especially when it comes to traditional art, I think people will, there will be people who love painting. And there are people who are going to really embrace these new forms of art. And then some of it will be translated for commercial use as well. Where there's, I think, we already see it, especially, in more conceptual pieces, whether it's for advertising or whether it's for publication, where, an art director will bring in somebody from another area to do something really unique because they don't want to use the tried and true photographer illustrator to illustrate a particular story or a concept.
Yeah. I mean, Nike does that all the time. Yeah. I hope that answers your question, Milka. Milka and I have been talking a lot about this. She is a teacher, and so teaches design, and so she's very curious about how do you teach in this era of massive disruption, at the college level. So that's another area I hear people talking about a lot who are teachers. Like, how do we prepare students going out to the workforce with technology? I mean, it is moving so fast. How do you prepare them?
Well, you know what? I mean, when I speak to young designers, and I'm always asking them, well, first of all, everyone wants to do branding. Like every single student portfolio is about branding, and it's all and they're all they're all consumer product brands. So it's like a soda can, just a cosmetic, things that we're all familiar with. But there's only so much room in the world,
yes,
for branding. And what is amazing to me is coming out of, at least in the New York area, because we had like a job fair for AIG in New York, and we saw a lot of portfolios, and very few people are studying experience design or even website design, like basic kind of like, can you do, like, I would expect a student to be able to do a simple WordPress site. You never see that. It's always branding. And so I am really wondering, how is it like, I feel like so many students are completely unprepared for technology. And a lot of them will say, well, our teachers are older, so they don't understand it. But they really want to do branding.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And that's part of the whole movement of the one thing I keep seeing is a hyper niching of certain areas, like we were talking earlier, where the number of people being employed is going to be less in specific areas. So, and I'm seeing web design is starting to be disrupted by AI as well. I'm seeing text to website coming out. So I kind of feel like you can't be married to the current platform. It's just more about understanding how it works conceptually, because I think the prompting is not going to go away.
No, it's not going to go away. And I think, what is the saying, that we're always fighting the last war that we fought?
Oh, yeah.
Like there's, and I think that that's very true. It's like we're looking, we're having a tendency to look backwards instead of look forward. But I also, when I come back to like, well, everybody wants to do branding. How many branding projects are in the world? Like, if a company rebrands, how long, like, they're not going to change it in a year.
Oh, no.
No. So it's like, if they do it, they're done for, a decade or something or more.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's just, and then I think it's also, the word branding is used fast and loose by a lot of people who are in many different areas that service, like communication. When I was a mentor in a New York City small business program, and it was crazy, because so many of the people who were coming into the program, they said, well, I do branding. And I'm thinking, how can everybody do branding? What, tell me more about, what do you do? And then some of them were event planners. And they're like, well, I do branding. I'm like, well, you're coming up with a theme for an event. That's not branding. And then, and other people would do corporate videos, but they would say that someone said, everyone says they're doing strategy too. Yes, there are a gazillion strategists out there. And, so they would do video work, which is like, be proud of it if you do great video. But
Yeah.
why is it all of a sudden you're doing branding? You're not doing branding. You're a storyteller. You're telling a
Yes.
story about
Yes.
something.
Yeah.
And, and sort of the whole idea of like campaigns has like gone out of the lexicon, and everybody's doing branding.
Hmm. That's interesting. Why do you think that is? Do you think it's education?
I think that there's something where people feel if they are associated with branding that it's more prestigious,
Hmm.
and that it can help them to maybe um, generate higher fees. But I, I'm I'm not sure whether in reality, because let's say Nike needs to brand a product. They're probably not going to go to someone who does event planning
Oh, no way.
to brand that product. And then
No.
if you're not honest with like what it is you actually do, then this goes back to all of the people like David Baker, Blair Enns,
Hmm.
um, Joel and all of the others who talk about positioning, that
Yes.
it's really about like you have to have clarity in your positioning, as especially as a whether you're a freelancer or a smaller firm. Like, people want to know what you're good at.
Hmm.
And there is a lack of focus, and then a lack of clear communication on what that is, because everyone wants to do branding.
That's so funny. It's so strange to me. It's, yeah, strange. Okay, so we are just about at the 45-minute mark. I want to ask you a couple more questions, and we're going to open it up for Q&A. Right now, what are you personally working on? What are you really passionate about?
Um, hmm. Well, actually, one of the projects, and Suzanne, who's on this call, has been working with me on this project. We're doing a pro bono project for our local animal shelter,
Oh,
and it's the 50th anniversary of their founding. And I actually met them through one of my clients who came to me and said, "Oh my God, can you just help them? They need so much help." And what had happened was they had like a kind of a goofy, charming logo in the
mhm.
70s.
Oh
And then
no.
2 years ago, somebody changed the logo to make it really sophisticated.
Oh
And they
no.
took all the charm out of the goofy, charming logo. And so we're bringing back the charm into a mark that is going to be that is more modern, and
Mhm,
will work for them across many different platforms. And so,
mhm.
because as you saw in the beginning, I have two small, charming dogs. They're on my
Yes.
Instagram all
Yes.
the time. And so it breaks my heart to, hear what some of these poor animals go through.
Yes.
Um, so I think it's really admirable work that these people do in terms of rescuing these animals from all around the country.
Mhm.
And so we're helping them with a little light strategy, a lot of graphic design, and we're trying to bring them up so like they'll have a good professional image so that they can use that for fundraising. So.
Oh, I love that so much. I love that. I love animal rescue stories. I'm such a sucker. I watch it on the
Oh
YouTube.
my God, I know.
When they show a sad animal, I'm like, oh, I have to see the end. I can't handle it. I need to see
Oh,
what
Sarah
happens.
McLachlan when she's singing.
Oh my God. Yeah, no, I love that. That's beautiful. Okay, last question for you. What are your top 3 current influences?
Well, we were talking about one of them earlier, Kara Swisher, who I think
Yes.
is an amazing woman.
Hmm.
And speaking about women in AI, she went to something I think last week. She said all the godmothers of AI that were in San Francisco. And she
Oh.
said, and one of them was 90. Can you believe that? And she was still
Wow.
talking about everything because it was called machine intelligence. Uh,
Machine intelligence. Okay.
back or machine learning when they had first started. And so she said, there are all these women, we haven't all heard of them, but she thinks many of them are going to take a much bigger role in what's going on as far as AI. So I think we will get we'll get a little more female energy in there.
Oh, thank God. No offense to any white males, but you've had your day.
Yeah, really. I mean, it's time for the chicks to come forward.
Yes, please kind of move aside. Thank you very much. Sorry.
Oh, so you asked me a few other things. So I read the New
Yes.
Yorker all the time. That's a big influence on me. And then also I'm finding there's some really other interesting news platforms that I really like. Puck is a new one. And I think it's super interesting. And then there's also Graydon Carter has one called Airmail. And I think that's pretty darn interesting as well.
What's that?
Airmail. It's a newsletter that comes out every Saturday morning. And I got totally hooked on it when it first started, and I would only get like the one free article, and then I decided to subscribe, and I look forward to Saturday morning. And it's Graydon Carter was the publisher of Vanity Fair, and so I just thought, you know what, it has a lot of like the Vanity Fair kind of vibe to it. It's fun.
Yeah. All right, I love that. Thank you, Lynda. If anybody has any questions for Lynda, feel free to turn your camera on, and you are free to ask them in person. You're also welcome to drop them in the chat if you do not want to turn your camera on. So just give them just a second to see what we're going to do. Let's see. And let me just see if we've got any other questions here in the chat. I'm waiting. Hi, Milka.
Hi.
Hi.
So I had some questions, but give me a minute. Let me reorganize, and I'll come back to you.
Completely fine. So, while we're waiting here for Milka to organize, can you tell people the best ways to interact with you and to find you on the web?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I think my email address is actually even on there. Like I just have it right on there, LinkedIn. It's also Instagram. We have a Decker Design channel, which is more focused on work. So you can reach me through that, or Lynda Decker Design, which is my dog channel. So you see all dogs all the time.
Oh my God, I love that.
And then, just even on our website, there's an info button, and you can always do that. It comes right to me. So that's easy. I'll type my email into the chat.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
That would be great. That would be really wonderful.
Yeah. Anytime you guys can reach out.
Oh, thank you, Lynda. I really appreciate that. For those of you who don't know, Lynda is really prolific in so many areas and just an incredible resource. I feel so incredibly lucky that she agreed to be on this podcast, and the fact that she's allowing you to contact her, that's really special.
I'm ready to ask my question.
Okay, Milka.
Thank you for the opportunity. This was a great session. And Heather, you're amazing, and you bring such amazing guest speakers. So thank you, Heather and Lynda. My question, it's not so much of a question, but it's more of a sharing an experience about, you mentioned that everybody wants to be a branding designer. I started as an interactive multimedia designer. I got involved with UX UI design, and at the same time, of course, doing brand design, doing campaign design, visual communication design. I don't call myself graphic designer. I call myself visual communication designer. Because when you say graphic design, people go, oh, I know how to use Photoshop, or my secretary knows Illustrator.
Yeah.
So, and visual communication design is more about, the holistic point of communication. But what I'm trying to say, what I'm trying to get into is that based on my experience, especially my most recent experience working for a security and privacy company, when I was helping them with redesigning the brand and at the same time redesigning their product design layout, because of many of these recent laws that have been passed, a lot of the design on the web has become democratized.
Mm-hmm.
So what do I mean by that? Because of accessibility, there's a lot of colors we cannot use. Because of accessibility, there's a lot of typography contrast we cannot use to push and pull that design capability. I feel very fortunate and lucky that they were having me as an expert designer to come in and help them and push the edge of the envelope as much as possible to make their product look sexy, attractive, comfortable, beautiful, intuitive. So that I was very proud that I was able to be there to push it. But experiencing that, I was like, you know what? There's no more room of creativity on the web for UX UI. And I decided from there on, I'm going to cross out interaction design and I'm going to go back and say I'm a brand designer, because brand then encompasses the whole entire visual communication. So to your point, I just wanted to share that that's what I'm experiencing because of all these rules and regulations that are passing, democratizing design. So I'm squeezing out of that area, and I'm to be honest with you, I'm trying to figure out what else is out there. How else can we use our creativity, in a way where we can entice and empower people and feel good. And of course, there's an area where you have to be very careful about. You've got a mass society that you're communicating to. Therefore, you can only design so much to communicate and speak to everyone. And then at the same time, our passion and our love for creativity is like, how can we push it? How can we push that experimental level and bring the design level higher and better for people to enjoy and be attracted and up level and differentiate and bring ROI.
Mm-hmm.
I'm done speaking.
Well, okay, that's a lot. But I think you do raise some very valid issues with web design. What I have found is with my clients is I have been working more and more in terms of redesigning their websites to reflect their brand. I have become much more of an editor and a copywriter.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of like another phase, I guess, in my career. So 10 years ago, I graduated out of a master's program at School of Visual Arts in design criticism. And it was a terribly difficult program for me to do because I'm not a natural writer. But it really, I feel that I am still not a great creative writer, but it taught me to be a very good editor. Like I feel like I am an excellent editor now. And what I find myself in terms and the creativity that I find in working with my clients on their websites has to do with my ability to look at a lot of content. And as a designer, I can really organize it. And I'm functioning as I'm like editor designer at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I sort of find the creativity in that sort of everyday work in a certain sense. But also, so the other part of that is how to structure all the different kinds of content for them, because instead of thinking of everything as long paragraphs, it's like, okay, how can we make, maybe this is an intro, I'm making this up, an intro paragraph. Maybe there's an information graphic that has some interactivity to it. Maybe after this, there's a short video clip. And so trying to sort of bring in different aspects of multimedia and thinking about a page as that experience So it's not so much taking the elements that we can use on the page, but bringing in different forms of media to it to speak in almost to speak in different languages to people. Because when somebody visits a website, someone may want to be able to just sort of skim some content really quickly. Somebody else may find themselves engaged by a short, and I really mean short video. I think clients have a tendency to they want to put 2-minute videos on, and I'm just like, no one is going to. Especially like, they love to pan across the logo, that's hanging on the wall, pan across the wall.
10
And no one
seconds.
wants to see that. Yeah, 10 seconds. So I think that's where, so in my mind, that is where the creativity in websites, that's where I see it right now, is helping them to understand that their content just doesn't have to be like a Microsoft Word page that gets just placed in there, but that it's a way to let's change it up, because writers don't have that skill. Because I've worked with so many writers and some people who are enormously talented, but they are they're so focused on seeing the words, making sure they're grammatically correct, having a correct number of paragraphs, and like, oh, do you need me to edit it down so that it's, I can edit 100 words out of it or something, but that's not what's needed. It's like, how do we take all these words and think of ourselves as sculptors in a way, and that we're molding this clay of information, and how can we give it back to them in a way that is much more interesting and experiential? So that is how I view it. But that's where I find the excitement in all of this. And it's also, honestly, I can get into trouble with potential clients, because my estimate is going to be higher than somebody who's just, going for a website that they're just, they're paying for a template off of whatever WordPress or wherever they're going. And, and they're just plopping the content in, but I want to shape the content. And that's really that's what I find exciting.
Yeah, I hear you. You can do that with websites, but not so much with product design. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah.
That's the challenge. Yeah, you have a lot more room with websites, whereas product, you can.
It has to function in a very specific way. Yeah.
Exactly.
Product is tough. I think product is very difficult. Yeah.
Thank you. How exciting.
Thank you, Milka.
Thanks for your question.
Thank you.
Liesl, it looks like you have a question too.
Hi, yes, I do. I have two, so I'll pick one. And the one I want to pick is, I'm old school. I've been a CMO of a financial services company and a telecoms company, like back in the day. So, you see the stuff circling around. What goes around comes around. It's a little bit like flared jeans. People are like, oh, flared jeans are in. And you're like, well, I'll just dig them out of my closet because we've been there before, right? But one of the things that remains is that communication is there to evoke a response from a person who sees it or experiences it. And if art is there to evoke a response, the commercial arts, as Heather was talking about, it's the commercial arts, is there to evoke a specific response for a commercial end. And a lot of this stuff that people are doing, which is templates, work with AI, etc., there's no understanding of what takeout is, how people think or feel, maybe not consciously, because a lot of it's subconscious, because we don't have a lot of attention on advertising, much as agencies would like to persuade us that we do. So it feels like we've got away from that. And it feels like with templates and people, on the one hand, I like the democratization. That's always a good thing. But on the other hand, people are wielding these tools without any kind of understanding of the human at the end of the communication, and specifically how they're trying to wield those tools in order to evoke a response. In your view, how can we get back to people thinking about, what's people's takeout from this, their experience, seeing a piece of out of home communication, etc. How can we get back to that when we're becoming farther and farther distanced from the consumer or the person that we're trying to influence?
I think that is a fantastic question. I don't know if I really have the answer, but I agree with you 100%. And it's really, I think part of it is I think a lot of it is driven financially, because a lot of organizations, and I see this also, I see it often with, some financial services companies, because they're trying to reduce headcount. They want people to, do more with less. And then people start to use those templates because they feel pressured and they have to get a certain amount of work done, and they're looking for shortcuts. And it goes back to, I think, where our standards have lowered. So it's really more about getting it done as opposed to doing it well. I think that, some of it, what I see with clients is one of the best ways to motivate them is through jealousy of a competitor. Like if they see a competitor is doing something that has been so well done, and then they're just like, I want that. And that to me motivates more than anything. But the other side of it is, I think, creating a legitimate financial argument. And that has been a real challenge for our industry from day one, to be able to say that there is an actual return on investment, where it's easier to look at consumer product companies, say like Nike can probably measure exactly what is going on with, the amount of, like, how effective a particular ad campaign is for, a particular product, where most other organizations, especially in, say, like telecom or financial services, because they don't have these massive campaigns that are as consistent, it's harder to measure. And, but so that's where I go back to, I think jealousy is actually a really good way to motivate them. It's like doing something that is so outstanding so that other people want, like they're just, and I've had this with clients where they're just like, I want one of those. And that is, that motivates them more than anything when they see how good something can be. But it's hard. It's really hard. I don't think it's simple, and I don't think it's easy.
Yeah, I that's a great answer. I think it's good because you've gone through the process of deciding, working with the client about who they want to be and how they want to be seen and who it is that they want to see them. And Brian makes a really good point in the chat there about people learning the tools and not really understanding the sort of the science, the art of the people side of it, the kind of consumer behavior side of it, how we consume these pieces of communication. And I wish they'd teach it more. I guest lecture quite a lot, and I'm quite stunned sometimes at how much some of the people in those schools, and they're good schools, but they're very much about what they want to say. And they're young, but they're very much about what they want to do, what they want to say. But to a degree where you're just like, well, hang on, who are you talking to? Let's start with that.
Well, I wrote a couple of articles on my newsletter on LinkedIn because I'm really fascinated by Daniel Kahneman's work. He just died in March.
Yeah.
And so the book is Thinking Fast and Slow, and it talks about the different ways that and I think this gets to exactly what you're saying, Lisa, is, where it's like there's certain types of information that we take in, almost unconsciously, and that's where design plays a role. But I think what has happened, especially in America regarding graphic design, is that it's just thought about like, oh, just, put that thing into a PowerPoint slide or something. And it's just sort of like, it's moving shapes around, and it's oftentimes belittled to be something that it's almost like, well, you're an adult and you're playing in a child's world, instead of thinking about it as, this is a tool that can actually motivate behavior. And I think if we can start to, as an industry, to speak about ourselves in that way, that maybe we can start to be taken a little more seriously. And so anyway.
Wow, that's really powerful. Yeah, a lot of people do forget that this is a tool to be able to motivate and direct people's attention, behavior, habits, and that empathy component, we lose it a lot of times, especially with AI coming in. The empathy question, I think, is going to be a big one.
See, I feel like I want AI to make schedules for me. I don't want it to design for me. I want it to do the stuff I hate doing. And I hate schedules. I hate them.
Yes. Or dishes. Or they could do dishes. That would be like amazing.
Oh my God.
Please do the dishes. Oh, agreed. Okay, you guys, we are at 1:05. If we have any last questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or turn on your camera. I'm going to give you just a minute here to see if we've got any more questions while we're hanging out with the fabulous Lynda Decker.
Oh, the fabulous Heather Crank.
Fabulous.
If no one has a question, I have a quick question.
Okay.
Because I've already asked a question. I've already asked my question. Lynda, what's your perspective on getting 75% of the job done and send it out the door versus at school, at design school, we learn like do more than 100%. But when you go to the outside world in the industry, it's like finish 75% and shoot it out. What's your perspective?
Oh, gosh. Well, you know what? I think it depends on where you are in your career and what type of organization that you're working for. Because I like to think that in everyone that I work with, I feel gives like 100% to every single project that we're working on, because it's really important for us to, like, if we can't offer a certain level of quality to our clients, then we're like nothing. But if you're in an organization that's maybe where the quality doesn't matter, I think you have to come to terms with yourself then if you want to continue to work in that type of organization. And people need to make livings, and sometimes you have to make a choice because you have to support your children, and but I think if you go down that road, I think it long term no good comes of it, because if you compromise your ability to have mastery over your subject and your craft, then what happens 20 years from now? It's just going to get worse. So
yeah, it's a compromise for design excellence. I agree with you.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's the money behind it that is saying just 75%.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any other questions for Lynda Decker before we close this? Let's give people just a second. Okay. Lynda, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and giving us this time. I know you are super busy. You have a zillion million things going on. And I just feel like these times with you are so precious.
Oh, Heather, thank you so much. I mean, I adore you, as you know. And thank you for inviting me. This was a blast.